For me, it was a very spiritual journey. Of course, I think like most storytellers, all of my life, people have said, you should be a storyteller. And I thought, no, I want to be a famous actor. But, but but one point in life, I was a consultant in a program for nonprofit leaders. And part of that program included a story week retreat led by Donald Davis. And so I went to that retreat as a consultant to the program. And I knew that I really, really wanted to do this thing called storytelling. And unfortunately, I could not find any workshopping groups in my community. I was living in Greater New Haven at the time, and I just couldn't find anybody who was doing it. And I thought, well, one certainly doesn't just jump up on stage without having had feedback and development. So I didn't do anything. And that was maybe like the late 90s, early 2000s. And then I had moved from the area. And when I came back, I was with a friend who she was actually the wife of the man who had sent me to the Donald Davis retreat. And I was reading to her. She was very ill at the time, had ALS, was in the declining stages of ALS. And I shared a really brief anecdote with her. And she was at the stage of her illness that she was in that machine with eye contact. She would type out what she wanted to say. And she typed out, you should be a storyteller. But her eyes were just dazzling with laughter. And I thought, for her, I'll do it once. And I knew of a community group. One didn't have to be a professional storyteller. You could go with notes and just tell your story. So between that, wanting to honor Jean's thoughts, and also I had a story about my mother, who was deceased at the time, that I wanted to tell for her. It was a story of her childhood that I knew was not widely known, and I just wanted to share it in honor of her. So I went to the community event and told the story. A few months later, I was at a social event. Three different people that I did not know came up to me and said, you don't know me, but I was there when you told that story, and I've been thinking about it ever since. So I thought, hmm, maybe I should be a storyteller. That's really, and fortunately, at that time, I was able to identify groups who were workshopping stories. One was the Institute Library in New Haven, and I started going there and workshopping, and that's how it began. I have no experience in music or theater or comedy to speak of. I have minute experience in theater. I was a theater minor in college in the 1970s. As an African American woman with no musical talent and no dance ability, I knew that the odds of supporting myself were slim and none. And so I chose to minor in theater as opposed to major in theater. And I think a good decision because the only actress of my era who made it without singing and dancing is Cicely Tyson. So it was a good decision for me. So no, none of that background. But I was an assistant theater teacher in an arts magnet program, and that was a wonderful experience. What really informs my storytelling is my experience as the daughter of two parents who really valued friendship and loyalty and demonstrated that in really just tangible ways. And they were always preaching how important it is to have people who love you, who know you and love you anyway, and will be with you. And they had friends from the cradle. Their friends, when I was born, were their friends from 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, that they were their friends to the end of life, which I thought was great modeling because I never fell into the trap of what's known as fast friendships. And so I really value that. Another experience is that as an African American woman who is part of a family that had been generationally New England, that's an experience that as I'm living it, I don't know it's a unique experience. It's only when I go outside of that community that I realize that that's a unique experience. And that informs a lot of my work. And it also is the impetus as to why the story that I want to tell about my mother is rooted in that what her history was as a child growing up in New Haven, Connecticut in the 1920s. And so that's really what forms it for me. And I think if I can slip into Ubuntu Storytellers, because they're very related, I shared that I had told that one story with notes at a community event, and that was March, and then that November, in the interim, I was going to workshops, and the group I workshop with was participating in Telebration, and they have workshop leading up to it. And I thought, well, I'll do the workshops and then I'll figure out if I can actually do this thing. I'm not sure I can. I was encouraged to do it. And so the night of celebration, I performed my story. The story is called, I think I did Beach Music. And Beach Music is one of the stories I'm going to perform in Woodstock. At the end of my performance, all the things that one would hope to hear, I heard, oh, that was wonderful. You're so talented. The story's so beautiful. But the thing that meant the most to me, the thing that changed the trajectory of my storytelling, was how many white people said to me, now, where were you again? Or how did you happen to be there? And the where were you they were referring to was my hometown, which I had identified, I thought, several times during the story. But what that triggered for me, having grown up in white suburban Connecticut, it reminded me that there's still so much ignorance about who Black and brown people are in this country and where we live and how we live, that there are essentially three dominant stories about Black and brown people in this country. And I thought, that's no one's fault. That's not to anyone's blame. It's just a matter of the stories don't get told, that we have essentially been the voiceless. And so in that moment, I decided, I call it the divine whisper, you will form a story troupe of people who identify as having Black and brown descent. And you'll go around and tell stories. And I want to emphasize it was divinely whispered, because no person in their right mind who had told one story would say, I'm going to form a troupe and I'm going to get all these talented, experienced, professional people to follow me. But you know what? They came on board. And so that's how Ubuntu Storytellers was born. There will be three stories. They're personal narrative stories about my delicious friendships that I've experienced in my life. One of them is a bit humorous, and the others is humor in them. But what the feedback I get is that people fall into the stories, that I disappear, which is really my goal as a storyteller, that I disappear and people find places in these stories that call up things sometimes that they haven't thought of in a long time, sometimes things they haven't wanted to think of, but comes up for them. And so I believe that the stories are universal for that reason. Once, as an aside, I was even told at a workshop, uh, I was approached and they were a little concerned because they had to do some work, some questions around my story. And they said they really loved the story and they really wanted to answer the questions, but they couldn't because it wasn't a Black story. I said, do you not know that I am a Black woman and that it was a true story from my own life? But for me, Amy, it underscored exactly why I formed Ubuntu Storyteller. It's like, no, that's not the story we were expecting to hear from her. So that's why Ubuntu Storytellers lives. And I think that people will share and appreciate that in the telling, that the stories are universal. Our experience, everyone's experience is different based on height, weight, color, size, region, clothing style. So we know that. But the core experiences are relatable. I know this is not 100% true, but I think for most people, it simply is lack of exposure. Now, I also do anti-racism training, and I always say to the consultants who work with me, we meet people where they are, and people can only know what they've been exposed to. But we can't hold it against people that they don't know better. And then I do say in my workshops, but now that you know better, I expect you to do better. But it is lack of exposure. Our stories have not been told by us for hundreds of years. They're just beginning to be told by us, which is what the film and American fiction is about. So, and very quickly, how the Moth process works is I was on the Moth Main Stage. The main stage is a live experience. It was a sold out auditorium of 2,000 people. Out of the main stage performances, the Moth goes back and screens those, and then ultimately one may or may not end up on the radio, Moth Radio Hour, and or on your podcast. So as my performance was last week, if I'm going to end up on the radio or in the podcast, I don't know yet. But the experience was extraordinary. And if I could just say quickly, for a few reasons, my friends and colleagues were just beyond. I can't explain to you the excitement, the encouragement. I can't tell you the 30 or 40 people who came in, and it was magnificent. And the Moth organization, I really feel I must share. They were wonderful, encouraging, professional, and really treated the artists as if they were valued as storytellers. And I found that just really fabulous. Artists across the board, no matter what the medium, we sometimes have experiences where we should be grateful that we have an opportunity to practice our art. It was exactly the reverse experience with the Moth, and I'm grateful for that. But it was an experience for a lifetime to tell a personal story to 2,000 people just plugged in and engaged was lovely. Thank you for asking about it.